Hey there, and welcome to what will likely be the last video of this entire course. So we've come a long way, and I'd like to start just by kind of reflecting on that. So think back to all the way back to week one, and how you felt and what you thought that you knew or didn't know about web development, and take a minute to think about everything that you've learned since then. So, it would be impossible for me to sit here and list every single thing that you learned, but just to name a few, you learned about GitHub, you learned about GitHub pages, you learned about HTML, HTML tags, HTML attributes, CSS, CSS selectors, ID selectors, element selectors, class selectors, CSS properties, CSS style rules, layout, flexbox, grid layout, JavaScript, including creating variables and using callback functions and doing DOM manipulation, and if statements, else statements, for loops, arrays, JavaScript libraries, P5.js, objects and object fields, and then the fetch function, getting data and using it, and then Bootstrap, both CSS and JavaScript, and then finally accessibility. And that's a lot, especially for an intro course. And so honestly, seriously, I think that you should be proud of what you've done so far and everything that you've learned and struggled with, and here we are. So again, just congratulations, and I really think just give yourself some appreciation for that. So with all of that in mind, I would like to close out this course just by giving us a chance to stretch those muscles and create something that's kind of meaningful to each of us. Because for me, what's interesting, or what's cool about coding and about web development is that you can make stuff with it, and there's kind of an artsy, creative component to it that I really love. And I hope that you kind of saw that in this course. So I encourage you to spend the next 2 weeks or so trying that out for yourself. So basically the way this is going to work is over the next 2 weeks, you can create really anything you want using web development. I've got a few ideas here, but I really encourage you to do something that means something to you, not necessarily something that like I tell you to do, because really that's the cool thing about all of this, is that you can create something for yourself. So I've got a few ideas. I've split them up into like mild, medium, and spicy. I'm using those words because I don't really like the idea of like thinking of things as basic or advanced or easy or hard or complicated or not complicated. It's more like, it's relative to you and your comfort level. So if you came in having never seen HTML before, then you can stretch yourself pretty far by sticking with, some of the things that we learned in the first few weeks. If you came in with more experience and you kind of already knew about HTML and CSS, then to get that same like level of personal challenge, maybe you want to try a few other things. So, take a look through the list and maybe that will inspire you. I'll also mention that there are a few other resources in here that I have used in the past for my own inspiration. So Codepen Challenges is an interesting page that this company, this editor, has like weekly challenges, and you can go through and like look at all of the past ones. So I don't know, let's look. So November of last year was text styles, and I can click into there and I can see that there were a bunch of other like weekly challenges in that month. So text shadows, there's week one, card text, knockout text. I don't even know what these things are, but these were the things that were the prompts for these challenges. So you might take inspiration from some of these if you want some help brainstorming an idea. And the other thing that I posted here was January, which I really love. I didn't get to do it this year, but I did it last year and I had a lot of fun with it. And this is like a procedural generation challenge or community where every day in January you get a different prompt and you kind of just play around with that. this is, doesn't have to be in January. Officially it's in January, but you can use these prompts for your own purposes. So maybe scroll through these and see if anything inspires you. And finally, I'll just say, like, if you just want to chat with me and say, hey, I'm trying to come up with ideas and I'd like to have a conversation about that, then as always, please reach out. Okay, so like I said, I really want you to use this time to make something that's interesting to you and something that, like, challenges you to use the things that might have been new to you in the course, no matter what that was. But I know that, like, as a student, it can be helpful to have like a structure of grades. So here's how I'm going to approach the grading for the final project. I am going to look for 5 criteria. Criteria 1 is, do you use HTML tags? And it's up to you which HTML tags you use. And if you use 1, that's cool. If you use 100, that's cool. They both check this box. And that'll be worth 2 points. Each of these will be worth 2 points. The next thing, similar to that, do you use CSS? And if you want to write your own CSS, cool. If you want to use Bootstrap, that's cool too. A Bootstrap theme file, that's cool. As long as you have some CSS in there, I'm going to check that box and say you got those 2 points. Then same kind of idea. Do you use JavaScript? I'm looking for like a script.js file or a sketch.js file. It's up to you what that JavaScript contains, but I'm hoping that everyone has at least a little bit of JavaScript in their projects. Then I'm going to look for one of these. These are kind of the, medium strength things that we learned in the class. And so I'm looking for not, all of them, but just one of them. And so if you have an event callback, like an onload attribute in your HTML, or like an on-click attribute in your HTML, then great. If you have DOM manipulation using something like inner text or inner HTML, cool, and so forth in this list. I'm looking for one of these. As long as you have one of these, then you get the 2 points in this category. And then finally, I'm looking for one of these. I'm calling these the more like, I hate the word complicated, but these were maybe the harder things that we learned about in the class. So again, I'm just looking for one of them, something like Flexbox or Grid or Arrays or Objects, or maybe using a JavaScript library or calling the fetch function to get some data from an API, or 100% accessibility score in Lighthouse. I'll be looking for that as well. So as long as you have one of those, then you get these 2 points. So the idea is that you can create anything you want, and I really would love to see you create something that is interesting to you. And all I'm going to be looking for is these 5 things. And as long as you have those 5 things, then you're getting the points. But of course, let me know if you have questions. Okay, so now I'm going to talk for just a minute about getting started, because it's going to be a little bit different than the previous projects. So let me go to my desktop. So in previous projects, you worked from the starter repo. So you have something like this Intro to Web Dev repository in GitHub, and each of the weeks has some starter code. So I don't know if I go into objects, it had some starter code that you then worked from. And I did this mostly because I didn't want to spend a ton of time on you like dealing with the files themselves and like setting up the boilerplate HTML. In hindsight, maybe I shouldn't have done it that way, but whatever. That's how we did it. You worked from these existing files. So that was for the previous projects. For the final project, I'm not giving you anything to start with, because I want to, encourage you to create something yourself rather than starting from scratch. But if I'm being honest, no one actually starts from scratch. So just to kind of walk you through how I would get started. First, you have 2 options. One is in your repository directory. I think that's here. Nope. Oops. In your repository directory, I have it just on my desktop here. So wherever you have it, or if you have in Replit, it's all good. You can go here and you can create a new directory in this folder. So if I go here and I say like new folder, and I'll call it, maybe I'll call it final project, or, if you know what your final project is going to be, like, you can name it after that, whatever you want. And I'll just give it that name. And then in here is where you'll put your index.html file, your script.js file, and your like styles.css file. You can call them whatever you want, but that's kind of the default. And there are a few ways to do that. One, I could just create a blank file. I could go to new text file in here somewhere, or I could like open up Atom and then save a file into this directory. But honestly, I think what most folks are going to want to do is go into one of the previous directories and just copy the files. If you want like just a bare bones starter code, I would go to this scratch directory and I would just copy the 3 files, index.html, script, and styles. I'm going to copy them and then I'm going to paste them over into final project. And what this gives me is a final project directory with index.html, script.js, and styles.css. So if I can open this, and now I have this, URL. This is my local file URL. But when I deploy it to GitHub Pages, the same rules will apply as they did last time, and I'll have this final project directory with index.html. And from here, I would, iterate and tinker. So I can open this up in Atom and wait for that to do its thing. I don't know why it's being slow. And, make some changes. This is my final project. Save that. Go back to my browser, refresh, and, practice the same kinds of things that you've been doing in all of the previous projects, but in this new final project directory. That's one way to do it. The other way to do it is by creating a new repository. So we did this way back at week 1. So if you don't remember exactly how to do that, maybe go back and revisit the week 1 material. But from GitHub, just the top level github.com, if I click this new button, I can create a new repository and I can call it whatever I want. Depending on what you're building, you might give it a more interesting name, but I might call it like final project. And blah blah blah, whatever. You can say add a readme file, but you don't have to. Kind of up to you. I'm going to create it, and now I have this new repo, and I can add files to it exactly like we did in week 1, or I can go to settings and enable GitHub Pages as well. So that's somewhere in here, Pages right here. So all of this is week 1 stuff. I would say go back and review that if you're, if you don't remember exactly how to do this, but I would recommend doing it this way by creating this new repo. If you want to like keep your final project around after the class, then I would probably put it in its own project repo. That way it's not like mingling with the code from the class itself. So those are 2 ways. What I would probably recommend is starting with the first way of creating this like final project directory inside the class repo. And then later, if you want to create a new repository and have your own URL and your own special like space that's just yours, then you can always do that later. But it's up to you. So those are the 2 ways that I would get started, and then the same flow that you've been using this entire class will work. If you go to GitHub and then push your changes, then they should be reflected in GitHub Pages, and you'll have your live URL, which is what you'll actually share with me as you submit your project. What else do I want to talk about? So yeah, let's getting started. And I honestly, I think that's kind of it. I think from there, it's up to you and what is interesting to you and what would you like to kind of get more practice on. At the end of the day, what you'll be sharing with me is like your live URL. So I'm not going to maybe go through the whole process of sharing my stuff to GitHub right now, but what I'll do is say that like you probably have a page like this, and these lead to the individual pages. And let me just go to like the Scratch directory. And this is the URL for like the existing page. And if you change this to be like final project, then that's the URL that you're going to share. This won't work for me because I haven't actually pushed my changes yet, but you'll share something like this, the URL for your project itself. Of course, as always, let me know if you have questions or if any of that was confusing. I am sure it was. So let me know how I can make it, more obvious. Okay, I think that's all I'll say for the final projects. I am really looking forward to this. Like I said before, I think that the thing that makes coding or web development so interesting to me is that it gives you the power to create stuff that's interesting and meaningful to you. So that could be a whole bunch of different things. It could be, something about your photography or like your own like art that you do, or it could be just a website about your dog, or a website that shows like some statistics in an interesting way about a cause that you care about. So maybe it's highlighting an issue that you think is important. So all of the above is sort of unlocked with the concepts that we've covered in the last 13 weeks or so. So I am really excited to see what y'all create, and I hope you are as well. But I think I'll leave it there and say, as you have questions, please reach out. I'm really looking forward to working with y'all in these last couple weeks. All right, I will see you in class.